Hello and welcome to what is a very hot Sri Lanka at the moment. The sand was very hot walking down here, but it's not far. And I could detour on the grassy bits between the trees. I think I'll look at some comments. I've had many encouraging comments from you all in your very supportive nature, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you. And amongst them, I've found some things for us to talk about. Well, let's begin with this one. I'm tempted to skip it and say this is a large subject we could talk about on another occasion, or I could talk about on another occasion, but that I've done that once already. So, can you please explain the concept of NIBBÄNA? Question mark. Well, let's deal with that first part of the question. The concept, so the idea of it. This would just be somebody, if it's me explaining it, my idea of it. And having how do we put this? Nibbana is something that cannot be explained by way of a concept. It is not of this conditioned world, of which all things are of this conditioned world, whether they be sankhara, so thought processes and created in our minds as concepts, or whether they be factual, evidential things like the tree by the side of me is a tree. They are still conditioned and impermanent. Nibbana is to be experienced by yourself, to be experienced by the wise. It is not of this, it isn't experienced through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching. It isn't to be conceived or thought about, because in order to attain to Nibbana, one would enter into the Rupa jhanas and then the Arupa jhanas, which are the non-bodily. So the Rupa jhanas are being free from sensual experience and physical feeling and senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. The Arupa jhanas are those of conceptual ideas, thinking, proliferation, conceptual thought, being free from that. So this initial part of the question in itself is a paradox. Of course I cannot, nobody whom is alive at the moment, unless they have experienced Nibbana, can give much of an idea as to what it is. Although there are many books and writings and talks on the very conceptual idea of what Nibbana might be and how it is described in the scriptures as best as it can be. But for me to try and explain it, I think would be no more advantageous to you than to you. Though it would be a lot more advantageous to you to practice meditation in order to try and experience at least a glimpse of Nibbana, so the cessation of feeling and experience in the body, and the cessation of emotion and experience of the mind. Even for a glimpse temporarily, this can give you some idea as to what Nibbana might be. specifically is achieving Nibbāna, the teaching of a point, the reaching of a point where we cease to exist when we die. And likewise, the Buddha didn't say whether we either cease to exist or continue to exist, or what happens after we die. But Nibbāna is, yes, as you go on to say, my understanding is that we are continuously reborn in this life and possibly are part of other past lives, but the Nibbāna is the point, but that Nibbāna is the point where we are no longer reborn. Yes, Nibbāna is the point whereby we become free from the ties, the fetters, that which is keeping us in the cycle of rebirth into samsara, into worldly life, whether it be in this realm or others. Nibbāna is freedom from that, freedom from rebirth. At death, so parinibbāna, so final Nibbāna, all-encompassing Nibbāna, death is that. The experience of Nibbāna during one's life as an attainment is an experience of a glimpse of that. It's like seeing something in the distance for a short while, and then until you get there, you're not part of it, the experience. You just know it's there. You've had a glimpse. So that isn't going to stop rebirth, having a glimpse of Nibbāna. The cessation, the end of this cycle of rebirth is parinibbāna. When one is fully awakened, an arahant, and the physical body dies, the thinking brain stops working, and then the citta, or mind, is no longer reborn into the cycle of rebirth and aging, sickness and death that we call and know as samsara. So in some respect, then you're asking, is that correct? Your understanding is correct. One could examine, talk about, read all the books on it for this entire lifetime, make a study of it, but it won't necessarily get you there. It's reading the menu without tasting the food. One needs to practice sila, samadhi, panya. And I've got a feeling that's going to be my answer quite a bit today, because some of the questions that I've noticed coming up are often quite complex in their nature. Sometimes I think people wish to really examine, read the instruction book, read the technical manual, read all the ins and outs of what's going on without actually trying it out. So one might, let's say, if you were expecting the delivery of a new product, I can't think of an example, but something that was on its way, you might spend all of the time in the meantime, whilst you eagerly anticipate its arrival, reading and looking at all of the articles written about this new thing you've ordered that's on its way, in your excitement, wanting to understand everything you can do with it, how it works. But the minute it arrives, you'll put all those manuals, those books and that research down, and you won't perhaps even open the instruction book or the quick start guide, but you will get straight on with playing with it, using it, doing whatever it's designed to do immediately, ending your research to enjoy what it is that you've ordered, what it is that has arrived. And this is much the same with a lot of questions about the practice. They are that, questions about the practice. But the practice is just sila, keeping in lay life as lay people just 5 precepts. 5 rules of moral virtue, or guidelines towards keeping moral virtue. Just 5. No killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. Intoxicants being things that alter your cognitive abilities, your mindfulness, your carefulness, maybe make you less inhibited and take more risks. Things that could result in you doing yourself or others harm. That is intoxicants. Not a cup of coffee, not a cup of Coca-Cola, not even a cigarette. One can use those which are stimulants, are in effect drugs. Air, oxygen, the air we breathe, is in fact a drug, a stimulant. It's life-saving, it's important, it keeps us alive. But our bodies are designed to use it to the maximum advantage and keep us awake, alert, and our bodies functioning and working with cognitive ability, with our full sense faculties of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the ability to discern what is good, what is bad. But as soon as we interfere with that, with what are termed as intoxicants, specifically drugs, alcohol. Alcohol is specifically mentioned in this precept as one that lowers those inhibitions. As soon as you use that, then the very practice you are trying to devote yourselves to is going to be further hindered, further than already what is there. 5 hindrances, which I might go into again in a minute, so I won't repeat them again now. But it inhibits and it, in fact, prohibits, I can go on to say, it prohibits your ability to attaining to samadhi, which is the only place, samadhi, which is absorbed deep states of meditation, seeing clearly the characteristics of existence, developing wisdom. It's only with this practice that you might get a glimpse of Nibbāna and have some understanding as to what the concept of Nibbāna is. So, on that basis, moving on, I hope I didn't skirt around the subject, but if I was to tell you Nibbāna is this, then I would say that how can it be that? Because I'd be using words to say what it is. I can only say what it isn't. And it isn't all that we experience. It doesn't come in within what we call the aggregates, or the khandhas, the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates, which are where our senses come together with our thinking brains and put together what we call sankharas, which are mental formations. Mental formations are everything. Sankhara is all things, but these are all conditioned things. And all conditioned things, including this very universe, and even this beach, this what I'm sitting on here, this sand wasn't always sand, once it was probably rock or something. But everything, all conditioned things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, we call dukkha. Anicca is impermanent, unsatisfactory, we call dukkha. Even ourselves, these bodies, these thinking brains that we consider to be our personas, our personalities, our very being, are only of those conditioned things, made up of elements, made up of solidity, liquidity, gaseousness, the temperature, the heat and the winds of our body. And also our consciousness developed in vijnana consciousness, the 5th of the 5 khandhas, vijnana, which is conscious awareness, which is the thinking brain's awareness, consciousness, as a result of what we're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, developing these mental formations of sankharas, mental formations, sankharas, all things. Even emotions in our minds are impermanent. One day we're happy, another we're sad. Even 1 minute we're happy, another we're sad. We could be very sad and then we could be laughing. We're not in control of these. And why are we not in control of these? Because these bodies will do what is going to happen to them naturally as a result of causes and conditions that aren't within our control. But even those that we can control by acts of body, speech and mind will only add momentum in a positive direction, but will not ultimately determine the end result. That is what we cannot control. So even with the deepest understanding of karma, that all we do, all of our actions of body, speech and mind, will have results we call vipaka, the results of karma. In what happens, we cannot determine this. We cannot say that for sure, by keeping the 5 precepts, all only good things will happen. But logically speaking, that will be mostly the case. So it is the safest bet. It is quite sure that by not keeping moral virtue, sila, by killing and stealing and raping, pillaging and doing all nasty things, you will have an unhappy existence within this life. Whether or not you have an understanding or faith, confidence that there is something that might happen after this physical body dies in terms of rebirth, whether you believe, understand that or not, the results of our actions can be experienced, manifest, will likely to manifest even within this life. So this is why we keep sila, why we keep moral virtue. Because this practice is about happiness, developing this emotion we call happiness. But that in itself is the result of conditions, the condition being contentment. Happiness only comes about as a result of being content. One might laugh, one might experience momentary, very brief, fleeting moment of what we might call as happiness. Hearing a funny joke, watching something on the television or the movie screen, something that distracts you from life, takes you out of samsara for a moment to stimulate the pleasant feeling of happiness, even laughing for a moment. But that is just distraction. Ultimate happiness comes from contentment. Contentment with little, with not stimulating anything through the sensual doors, windows, not watching TV, not going to the movies. But you can still do those, but if one can derive contentment without those, even those things will be even more pleasurable when you get to experience them. So, moving on. Well, I haven't moved on very far. I think I was still on that same question, really. Oh, I'm rather a liability, mainly because of intoxicants. I feel like I have the wisdom to quit, but not the will or strength to. I'm sure I've already answered this. All right, how can I practice sila and samadhi to build courage and commitment? Well, I think I answered it in the last video, and I've just spoken again about intoxicants. So you need to get help and try and give up. I answered a similar question, not necessarily that specific one, so perhaps look at either the last video or the one before that, and maybe look at the comments where someone's very kindly identified the questions in there that are contained, and you might be able to get an explanation. I won't go into it again just now. But you need to, Sila, including the fifth precept, is a very important part of the practice, as I've just said. As far as courage and commitment, that will only come as a result of giving up, stopping using intoxicants. I'm not going to soften the blow of that in any way. I'm not in any way going to ever suggest that it's okay to drink alcohol and think that this practice will work, because it won't. You might get all sorts of benefits from this practice, and from Buddhist practice, and from Buddhism, from meditation, from keeping the other four precepts, of course. Yes, you will. There's untold, countless, huge benefits from the practice. But as far as the end goal is concerned, and that is freedom from suffering within this lifetime, not even Nibbāna. I'm not even talking about attaining to the first stage of enlightenment, Sotapanna, here. We're talking about just happiness, contentment, as I was just describing. This will not be attained through drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana. And everybody can argue for ever and a day about that, but you're just arguing with the Buddha, not me. You're arguing with 2,567 years of practiced experience of what the Buddha taught, the Dharma, through his Sangha, not me. But from my own experience, I used to drink alcohol, and now I haven't drunk alcohol for a very long time, since taking up this practice, which I wasn't able to even take up until after I'd not been drinking alcohol for quite some time. I was meditating, but it took quite some time for my mind to settle and be able to take on meditation. And it in fact took the addition of Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, for me to really get deep into meditation and experience it to the full. And that was, I think, because we are adding to the practice of meditation Sila. It reinforced the importance of what I'd already given up, but it reinforced the wisdom behind that, the importance of that, the understanding of mindfulness. Should my walking meditation advancement be equal to my sitting meditation for it to be effective? And does ambient surroundings play a big role in walking meditation? So I'm not sure I understand what you mean by walking meditation advancement. Be equal to my sitting meditation for it to be effective. So walking meditation is perhaps you're not going to get easily into deep states of absorption. So jhanas, we call them, for instance, when you're walking up and down, because you're having to walk up and down. You're not having to, you've chosen to walk up and down. So I think we practice sitting meditation primarily, and we are able to intersperse with our sitting meditation that with walking meditation. And the two are two different postures. The Buddha taught that we can practice in these four postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. We tend not to use lying down because it's very easy to fall asleep, but it is also very useful if you're experiencing physical discomfort, pain, illness, because you might not necessarily be tired and you are maybe having or forced to lie down, so it's useful then. Other than that, sitting is the best way where one can get deeply absorbed into samadhi and experience the cessation of bodily feeling. Now, I think it's quite difficult realistically speaking, if not impossible, whilst walking, to no longer experience bodily feeling, because you're doing something with your body, you're moving, you're having to, at the end of your walking path, turn around and be aware of this. So this is not absorption. So there's no comparison to be made there in terms of attainment, or how did you describe it? Advancement, if that's what you mean. Attainment, achievement, states of absorption. But you can, to some extent, get into the rhythmic flow of walking meditation, that you do become absorbed, but it's in a different way. It's like absorption through when sometimes we're chanting maybe many repetitive chants of a chant like Itipiso Bhagava Araham, reflections on the 9 qualities of the Buddha, and then the Dharma and the Sangha. We might repeat that 108 times, and this could take up to an hour or so to complete. And during that you can become, even though you're doing something, both with your voice and the action of counting maybe on your mala the number of repetitions, and thinking about the words you are chanting, this is doing something with most of your able resources. But because it's so repetitive, like walking up and down, you can still become to some degree absorbed, but only to a certain extent, and it's a slightly different kind of absorption. It's more immersion in what you're doing than absorption and being free from your surroundings. So on that point of the ambient surroundings play a big role in walking meditation, much like sitting meditation, not really. As long as you are safe, you are relatively comfortable in terms of, so for instance, I'm sitting under this tree, not in the blazing hot sun, where I would surely get very ill very quickly. One sits in surroundings or walks, has your meditation path in surroundings that are as satisfactory as your environment allows, as is possible. In fact, if you have great vistas and views of the Himalaya mountains, or valleys and beautiful picturesque lakes, mountain ranges, sunsets and skies, this is only a distraction. This is just sensual pleasures. By all means, enjoy all of these things. I come and sit here of an evening and watch the sun set over the sea. But I'm doing just that, watching the sun set over the sea. This is not meditation. In a way, it's a kind of meditation. It's in some uses of the word, but it would not be something considered as a useful meditation object. It's moving, for a start. A solid colour, a candle flame, something like that, are used, described as one of the many. There are 40, maybe 38, and 10 of them are colours anyway, meditation objects the Buddha specifies, but the moving sunset, the changing conditions around that, sitting looking at a view, are not. They are doing just that, enjoying a sunset, sitting looking at a view. Like going for a walk in a beautiful countryside setting. That isn't walking meditation. It's going for a walk in a beautiful countryside setting. Walking 20 to 30 paces up and down, you could have a concrete wall that side, a concrete wall that side, and just enough room to turn around at the end and come back and do the same. That is, in fact, as long as it's warm, the surface is something okay to walk on, that is as good, if not better, than any other situation. When I was confined to the very short distance in the van I was living in, 3 paces, I still practiced a little walking meditation. I could stand up straight. So, and also when I was living in a little metal hut once for a long time, corner to corner, in a little room even, you might get 10 paces. As long as there's nothing distracting you, you're getting some flexibility into your body and some exercise and some break in your sitting. So you might sit for 40 minutes, walk for 20, sit for a further 40, walk for 20, or an hour sitting, half an hour walking, like this, breaking up your meditation, until you can sit for a long period of time, 3 hours. Then you will need perhaps to get up and walk for 20 minutes, half an hour, but just not go for a walk and ruin all that you've built up, but just walk up and down in the same area where you've been sitting or somewhere nearby. So nothing much can take you off of your, away from your practice and distract you onto other things in the meantime. So get up after 3 hours, maybe walk up and down, and then sit again. This is the point really of walking meditation. I'm just coming across your videos. How are you paying for surgery? Who will nurse you as you recover after surgery? Well, I think that's from an old video, old question. So I can't pay for anything being a monk, but some very kind lay people who also visited me here prior to my surgery and things, they paid. Now I could have taken advantage of free medical care in the country I'm in at the moment, but I usually prefer not to unless it's an emergency, because that I have in my own country, of which I'm a citizen. I could go back to the UK and we have a medical healthcare system for citizens of the UK. I think it's unfair if you're travelling to further encumber, put a burden upon the very limited and very, as they are in my own country, limited and overused or required resources of a medical healthcare service. So as a traveller, I would prefer to obtain such services as surgery privately, or go back to my own country where they're on offer freely. Well, nothing's free, you pay taxes of course, but rather than encumber what's on offer here further. So I had the choice and chose to go privately, and very kindly some lay supporters of mine paid for that surgery. As far as whom is will nurse you as your recovery after surgery, Sila Samadhi Panya. That is my nurse. It is the prescription, the medicine, and the nurse. The consultant is the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. So I didn't really need much nursing. Just had to be careful. Many people here have helped for the first, when I couldn't go on Pindapata to collect my food on alms round every day, people brought food to where I was living. They saw I hadn't come on alms round. In fact, I didn't on one occasion go on alms round because I went for a trip one day to Kandy to see the Buddha of the tooth of the Buddha at the temple there with some lay people. And even then, people came to my house thinking I must be ill, so they brought food to where I'm staying in my absence. So people looked after me in that respect also here very well. But in answer to your questions, lay people very kindly paid for that. Can I please explain dependent origination and how it differs from the Western concept of cause and effect? Also, can you explain the 12 links and how they give rise to one another? Well, I've already made a video on that, and I've sent you the link called The 12 Links of Dependent Origination, and I may well do that again soon, because it is the very basis of really everything we understand in terms of panya, wisdom, as a result of practicing, keeping moral precepts, sila, and practicing meditation. When we fully understand impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self, anicca, dukkha, anatta, when we fully understand that, we come to this realization that our suffering is the result of desire. But then to break down what desire actually is, apart from the three root causes of greed, hatred and delusion, why do we have those? Why do we keep fueling greed, hatred and delusion? We need to look at these 12 links of dependent origination, which are very useful and clear to that end. So I have spoken about it before, so please refer to that video, and if you don't see the link there and someone else wants to look at it, just English Buddhist Monk 12 links of dependent origination should get you there. But I will talk about it soon. As far as how does it differ from Western concept of cause and effect? Well, I'm not sure what the Western concept of cause and effect is, other than you push something, it'll move that way. You stop something going that way, it'll stop. That literal, I think that's sort of Newton's theory or something like that, the scientific explanation. Karma's a little more complex than that, in that it does take into account previous lives, future lives, as to where and when those results, vipaka, of karma, actions might manifest. But even that aside, it's still complex, because you'll see people perhaps seemingly doing bad things, but living seemingly unhindered existence. This happens because karma isn't as simple as you push something, it goes that way, you stop something, it stops. No, it has more ramifications. This is where the explanation through the 12 links of dependent origination really come into their own fruition, in terms of helping you to understand karma better, helping you to understand the nature of what rebirth is. They begin, the 12 links, with jati, they can begin with jati, which is birth, but they begin usually with ignorance, and it is ignorance of karma, of our actions of body, speech and mind, that lead to rebirth, and therefore this inevitability of aging, sickness and death. Again, that cycle. So that's probably the difference, if that is perhaps not very clear, I'm not sure. I have a question about the absorptions. The subject of vimutti animita, ceto vimutti specifically. How do we practice signless liberation of the mind? So I think I answered a bit abruptly and briefly. I just said you don't practice signless liberation of the mind. You practice sila, samadhi, panya. Maybe you will experience signless liberation of the mind, or vimutti. Actually, vimutti really means sort of mental separation. So, or we could call it liberation. In other words, becoming unattached from what it is we either like and we don't, or we dislike. It is in fact another expression of letting go. It is really moving towards the final attainments and liberation. So liberation is a way of understanding vimutti. Now this, of course, is a quality we develop, much like the qualities in the Brahma Viharas of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others, and upekkha, equanimity. We need to develop those qualities. We can practice them in some respect. We can practice generosity, dana, giving, and this will help us develop metta, loving kindness, because they go so very closely together. Kindness towards other is demonstrating an activity showing metta, loving kindness. But the quality of loving kindness is a quality in oneself that you develop, as is vimutti, liberation, freedom from attachment to all conditioned things. This comes about as an experience through absorbed states of meditation. The absorptions, I'm guessing you mean the jhanas, maybe. You might see a glimpse of vimukti. You might very well see at that stage the signless liberation of the mind. So I think it's animata. So nimitta is a sign. So you might see all kinds of phenomena, lights, hear sounds, experience bliss and joy in meditation, in absorbed states. But when these experiences dissipate and are gone, and there is no longer any experience either of the physical body or of the thinking mind, you are in a state of jhana, arupa, and rupa jhana and arupa jhana that is deeply absorbed to such a level that all that we experience with the physical body and the thinking mind is no longer relevant. And this is what they call animata, signless vimukti, liberation of the mind. This is close to what we can use as a way of conceptually understanding what we call NIBBÄNA. NIBBÄNA, incidentally, just means the cooling down of something. So cooling down of something isn't that glamorous when you think of it that way. But we use it to describe, as best we can, this state of liberation through the signless liberation of the mind, or an animata vimukti. But analysing such things won't get you that. Practicing sila, samadhi, panya will. When I say practicing panya, again, this is wisdom, it's developing a quality, but you can practice the reduction of unwholesome mind states and the increase of wholesome mind states through our activities of body, speech and mind. So all our actions of body, speech and mind that are generous towards others, even generosity towards ourselves, in giving ourselves time to practice, being kind to ourselves also, not pushing ourselves too hard, but towards others in acts of generosity, like dana, are acts towards liberating the mind ultimately through this practice, and this is developing wisdom. My biggest problem: leg goes numb after a few minutes, thigh shakes, knee to back and neck pain. Give me some advice, Bhante. Well, I've answered that in the last video. Please watch the video again, because you probably weren't listening, especially if all these things going on with your legs. So I was explaining that you must make yourself comfortable when you sit and meditate, and this doesn't necessarily mean with cushions and mats. I would also pay attention, I didn't mention it there, but I think this is coming from someone who might be sitting there wearing tight jeans or trousers of something like that, or even a tight belt. Wear loose clothing or no clothing at all, something, don't be wearing these tight trousers when you try and sit in the half lotus or even Burmese sitting posture. Even sitting in any position for a length of time with tight clothing is going to cut off the blood supply. This is all you're doing here, this is all you're experiencing, is the interfering of the blood supply or the nerves to create such physical reaction and phenomena. Just use the time to sit and use maybe body scanning meditation to really analyze what you're doing with your body when you sit in meditation, how you're positioning it, and watch the videos, of which there are a few on this channel, about how to sit. Basically that, how to sit for meditation. There's also one about how to sit for a long time in meditation, I don't think in any of them I mentioned clothing, but it brought to mind when you said this, someone who came to me to meditate, talk about meditation and wanted to meditate, and I said, well, you can't meditate. And he said, why not? I said, because you can barely stand in these trousers. He was wearing such tight jeans, he could barely stand properly, let alone sit cross-legged on the floor. and I wasn't ready for him to start taking things off in order to meditate. So I said, you know, be realistic. Your body is that, it's a body. We must be kind to it, take care of it, not push it too far, just for aesthetic appearance. So pay attention to what you're wearing. We wear very loose clothing as monks, so this is why I often forget to mention that. Even your underwear, I would imagine, is important. You don't want things creeping up here and there and getting twisted. So pay some attention to what you're wearing when you want to sit to meditate. And be kind to yourself. Wear comfortable clothing. Why do you bow to the Buddha? He is not God. Is that something he wants those who follow his path to do? I'm genuinely curious. Well, he doesn't want any more because he's gone to Parinibbana, as I just discussed. And didn't he also decree that it should be done? No. He decreed that it should be just the case that we follow the Dharma, specifically the Vinaya Pitaka, in terms of what he taught and how he taught Buddhists to behave in terms of sila, and then understand Dharma from that practice of sila, samadhi and panya. We are not bowing to anything or anyone. Through veneration, maybe, paying homage to, maybe, but to the triple gem. This is why we bow 3 times. The Buddha, our teacher, whom is long gone, but out of respect for his compassion to have taught for 45 years and leave us the second Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, all that we can learn from his teachings, the suttas, in that time he spent teaching us. And thirdly, the Sangha. So not me, but the Sangha of monks going right back to the Buddha, but in that lineage has continued to this day, which includes me and all of my brother monks in this day and age, whom form the current monastic Sangha of monks and nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, here today to continue practicing in line with the Vinaya Pitaka, out of respect of his wishes, what he saw as all that would remain as a result of him. Not something to be prayed to, worshipped or honoured, but to be practiced. So it is a mindful exercise, practically reminding us of the importance of that. So see it as you wish, but we're not bowing to a god. When people bow, as they do in Sri Lanka, to monks, they're not bowing to the individual, but they're bowing to what the robes, that uniform of the individual, represents, the Sangha. Ultimately, the noble Sangha, the Arya Sangha, of the disciples of the Buddha, whom lived with him, were taught directly by him, and practiced in the way he taught, and then passed, firstly verbally, and then later it was written down, these teachings to us to this very day. And I'm sure I've explained that many times before, and I think you do know the answer, most people asking that, but maybe some people don't if you're not coming from a Buddhist background. I appreciate that. And finally, I think this is finally, no, not quite. Does nicotine and code, I think you mean Coke maybe, count as intoxicants? If you mean Coke as in Coca-Cola, no, they don't count as intoxicants, but then you refer to it when one has schizophrenic psychosis, because they both have psychoactive effects on individuals with schizophrenic psychosis. Well, that's a whole different area of understanding, which I don't know about because I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist or medical doctor or physician. So in relation to, I mean, if you were to ask me, are carrots or potatoes an intoxicant? but somebody who was allergic to carrots and potatoes, and I could say, no, carrots and potatoes are not an intoxicant, but somebody who might have anaphylactic shock and die as a result of eating carrots and potatoes, it would be bad advice, obviously. So, I mean, I can't relate all medical conditions, whether they be mental or physical, to the fifth precept, which clearly states, as I explained at the beginning of this video, what intoxicants are. But you know, as a sufferer, that Coke or nicotine is bad for you. So abstain from Coke and nicotine if it's going to interfere in any way with your well-being, firstly, and then secondly, your practice of meditation. But firstly, you must look after your health and well-being, both physically and mentally, and that goes for us all. We must be kind to ourselves, practicing metta for ourselves, karuna, compassion for ourselves, because without being kind, having compassion for ourselves, how can we be kind and have compassion for others? It always starts with this vehicle of body, this physical body and this thinking brain. We must look after it. Whether we consider it to be a self or not a self is not what I'm talking about when I refer to ourselves in the conventional terminology of language. We should look after ourselves. We need these bodies to practice, so we treat them kindly and we are careful with them. Like if we were to borrow someone's car, we would look after it. We're borrowing these bodies, so we should look after them in order that they will enable us to attain to our goals of liberation, being free from suffering in this lifetime. Let's see, how many are there? I think that will do for now. Once again, I failed to check the time when I began, but hopefully I haven't spoken for too long. I hope if there's something there useful, that you can use it and incorporate it into all of your daily activities and into your practice. If not, then please just let it go. There's no need to begin debating it in your own mind with a view to debating it with others. Just leave it be and continue with your practice as before. But if there's something useful, pick it up and use it, and please share it, and that is always appreciated. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.